Welcome into the install with Greg Cosell of NFL Films. Buck Reising back for another episode. Life's a little different nowadays in Tennessee, Greg. People are losing their heads. They think the Titan season's over, but I think that the conversation we're going to have today is going to be a little different, not about what the Titans' long-term implications are or how much their Super Bowl aspirations have changed, but how teams are going to play this Titans team differently. What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, and you know how coaches think, Buck. I mean, you've been around coaches, all they're worried about is this Sunday. That's all they're worried about. I mean, obviously, everyone is sad for Derrick Henry, and it's a shame because a dominant player. I've met him, him, I'm sure, a great individual. So everyone is sad. But as you and I both know, life goes on in the National Football League. Today, as we're recording this, it's Wednesday. They practice today. They have a huge game on national television on Sunday night, and life goes on in the NFL. That's the nature of the business, as sad as it might be.
1,000%. It's next man up, and there's going to be a game played on Sunday night, no matter who is playing in it. So obviously, this Derrick Henry situation is going to impact not necessarily what the Titans want to do from their offensive philosophy, but how defenses want to play them, Greg, and particularly how they're going to kind of focus more on what the Titans have available to them as opposed to what Derrick Henry can give them as an X-factor player.
Well, there's two elements to this, Buck, and you hit on both very generally. And one is, do the Titans make slight adjustments in their offense? Now, they're not all of a sudden going to become a throw ball offense and, open up in the gun and have Tannehill toss it 50 times a game. We know that's not going to happen. But the question is, because Derrick Henry had far and away the highest percentage of first down rushes of any back in the league, does that percentage shift a little bit? Do they feel that they want to throw the ball a little more? And by throw the ball, I don't mean go in spread formations, put 3-4 wide receivers on the field. I mean, still line up with, whether it's D'Onta Foreman, whether it's Adrian Peterson, whether it's Jeremy McNichols, whoever it may be. Do they feel that they want to still line up with multiple tight ends? Do they still want to put a fullback out there? Do they still want that to be their personnel and formation foundation? That we don't know the answer to that, because don't forget, teams have big playbooks. So in any given week, they could take a piece of a playbook and say, hey, you know what, guys, this week, this is going to be more of our focus than we've done in previous weeks. So that's one thing we don't know. The other thing that'll be very interesting is how defenses, starting with the Rams on Sunday night, and obviously we'll get into the Rams defense in a moment, with they just picked up a player who I'm told is pretty good, so we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah, historically, pretty solid player.
Yeah. So how will the Rams play them, and then how will teams in general play them? We know how teams played them with Derrick Henry. The goal every week was you needed to stop Derrick Henry. You needed to structure your defense from an alignment and personnel perspective to stop Henry. You needed to get a ton of bodies to him. You needed in some ways to give up to get. And to me, defenses will not do that anymore. Defenses could well take the approach. You know what? If you want to line up in the I formation with a fullback and hand it off to D'Onta Foreman, have at it. You know what? We'll tackle D'Onta Foreman. We'll be good to go. We don't need to put extra people in the box. We don't need to structure our defensive front alignment just to do that. We'll play how we play, and we'll take care of your backs in the normal course of events, with what we normally do tactically. And I think you're going to see more of that. I don't think teams are going to make, a strong decision to say, hey, we better shut down that run game or else.
Right. And that's been the approach, obviously, as it is week in and week out for teams playing the Titans. But without Derrick Henry necessarily being hugely efficient against the Kansas City Chiefs and against the Indianapolis Colts, they were able to still have success with their passing game against the Chiefs and the Colts to capitalize on some of those opportunities that maybe a loaded box presented for the play action passing game throughout the course of those two games. So from that standpoint, Greg, with what the Titans have available to them, we know that this Rams defense is going to be a challenge under normal circumstances, and that was before they added Von Miller. Right. They are an interesting defense. They are a hugely talented defense, but as you pointed out to me before we started recording, I think there's some misconceptions about what kind of coverage concepts the Rams tend to lean towards, given that Jalen Ramsey is on their roster, and it might not actually be what people think.
The Rams are a heavy zone-based defense. People might think, oh, they have Jalen Ramsey, so that he's going to line up and he's going to match up man to man. Now, are there times he does that within the course of a game? And you will absolutely see that with A.J. Brown at times, but that is not their MO. And they've played really quality receivers, so people can't say, well, now that he's playing A.J. Brown, that's going to happen. No, they've played quality receivers, and that's just not the way they play. In fact, other than the New York Giants, the Rams have played the fewest snaps of cover one, which is man-to-man coverage with a single post safety. They played the lowest percentage of cover one of any team in the league, okay? And they've played the highest percentage of cover three, which is the zone-based version of a single high safety. And they've also played the highest percentage of cover four, which means you have two safeties. You're playing in a two shell, and it's a zone concept. Now, cover four has matchup principles to it, but at its core, it's zone. So the point I'm making is ultimately that they're a zone-based defense, not a man-based defense.
The Colts, and you'll correct me if I'm mistaken on this, but the Colts like to play a ton of zone coverages as well, Greg.
Not as much as they have the last couple of years. See, that's another thing. It's funny you say that, because that's why, you got to watch the tape as I do. The Colts this year have started to play a lot more cover one. They were multiple in particular against the Titans, but overall, the Colts have played far more cover one this year than you might think. The perception is that they're zone based. And in fact, they're in the top 10 in the league in terms of their percentage of cover one. So the Colts have kind of evolved a bit, as a number of coaches have. Dan Quinn with the Cowboys. Everybody may remember him as the Legion of Boom defensive coordinator at the beginning when it was all cover three. Cowboys play a lot of cover one. So, coaches and teams evolve now.
Certainly. So from that standpoint, how Ryan Tannehill and how this Titans passing game were trying to attack the Colts, they found ways to create turnovers. And Tannehill's it's not been an ideal situation with some of the decisions that he's making, but he walked us through his first interception that he threw, Greg, where there seemed to be four Colts in the area of the ball. And in the post-game press conference, he told us that what he was seeing in real time was not what the play ended up being.
Let me ask you this, because so he actually described what he thought it was?
Yes,
because my sense seeing the play is he threw that ball to the second slant, which was Marcus Johnson. Okay.
Yes.
It was a double glance, as we call it. It was Brown from the slot and Johnson from the outside both ran slants or glance routes. So it was double glance to the field. Now, pre-snap, to me, the Colts showed man, and my sense is Tannehill read the coverage as man.
He did. That was what he told us in real time. And then, and apparently what the Colts did.
So what the Colts did is he did not expect more to come off Brown and be sitting in the passing lane to Johnson.
Which is exactly what he did.
Okay, good. Because if I could read what I typed to you, because obviously I didn't hear Tannehill say this. So I said it was cover two, and Moore passed off Brown from the slot and looked to the second slant, which was Johnson. My sense is Tannehill read the coverage to the field as man and did not expect Moore to be in the passing lane. That's exactly what I typed.
And that's exactly what he told us after the game. Turns out, Greg, you know what you're talking about when it comes to this stuff. So
he was surprised. So that's one of those plays, in all honesty, where you got to tip your hat to the defense. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with Ryan Tannehill. You know what? These are professionals. As the expression is, the other team and the other coaches get paid too. They just did a great job of disguise. They fooled him. He doesn't get fooled very often. They fooled him. And, he read it as man. It turned out to be zone, and Moore was sitting right there.
I ask only for the clarification of the offense or for the audience, Greg, just because they looked at that interception as one of the worst that they've seen, at least, in the Twitter. I love the people on Twitter. They support this podcast and we appreciate their support. But it was largely hammered as one of the worst interceptions that Tannehill's thrown. And it wasn't the way that it came off to me watching it back, and certainly not the way that he described it, the way that they got one over on him.
Did he talk about the second interception as well?
He did not. He did not talk about the second interception.
Okay, because I mean that was just really good defense as well. That the Colts rushed 6, knowing that Nichols would have to be part of the protection, and then they dropped out I think 2 interior D linemen, and the safety Odom came clean off the edge, which is the guy you normally leave clean because he's off the edge, he's not inside, and Tannehill under duress tried to throw it to Ferkser on the inbreaker, but Lewis was one of the D linemen who dropped out, and Lewis was sitting right in the passing lane, and I think the ball was tipped as well. But yeah, that was another really well schemed play that I think based on what Tannehill saw in his mind, he threw it absolutely to the right guy, because you don't count on a D lineman who takes 2 steps forward as a pass rusher to all of a sudden be 8 yards in underneath coverage. So that was just another really good defensive play. It happens.
It was an incredibly fun game to watch from a chess match standpoint.
Yeah, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
you're fine.
That play changed the game, because as you know, Lewis ruptured his patella tendon running with the ball and he fumbled, and the very next play was the Brown 57-yard touchdown. So that 2-play sequence changed this game. Yeah,
and certainly Titans fans grateful for the fact that they're able to maintain that stranglehold on the AFC South because of it. So from the standpoint, we've talked about the coverages, the coverage game plan or the coverage concepts that the Rams like to run, Greg. Now, they obviously added Von Miller, who may not be at the peak of his powers at this point in his career, but is still an incredibly formidable pass rusher. He goes, if somebody like Dante Fowler can get 11 sacks playing alongside Aaron Donald, I imagine that Von Miller is going to be able to thrive with that kind of attention that those two will attract and allow them to play off each other. What is Von Miller at this point in his career, and how does he fit what the Rams want to do?
Well, I think Von Miller, when he's playing well, fits with what anybody wants to do.
Sure.
So now you could run into a situation here. And again, neither you nor I know exactly how Raheem Morris and that staff will use Von Miller relative to Aaron Donald. But most teams, and that particularly in passing situations, because in normal down and distance, the defense is the defense. The guys play the called defense. Okay, when it's 1st and 10, when it's 2nd and 3, they play the called defense. It's really when you get to passing situations, when teams go to their nickel and their dime, because the Rams are a big dime team. I think they've played as much or more dime than any team in the league. For the audience, that means 6 defensive backs. They're a pretty high percentage blitz defense as well. So they're an aggressive defense. So now, when you think about Aaron Donald, what do you think about? You think about the fact that most teams will slide their protection to Aaron Donald, because it's I spoke with an offensive line coach in their division this summer who said that, it's really difficult to block him one-on-one.
Right.
You don't want to be in that situation. So what do teams do? They slide to Aaron Donald. So if you put Von Miller opposite Aaron Donald, then you kind of get stuck, because that means either he's one-on-one with a tackle, or you have to keep extra bodies into pass protect. And most teams, when they get to 3rd down, offenses would like to get 5 out, Buck. They'd like to maximize the eligible receivers that are available, and that's right. 5. And if you have to start keeping guys in, then that makes it easier to defend, because football is a numbers game. If you're only sending 3 receivers out and they have 7 or even 6 in coverage, they have the numerical advantage. Now, that doesn't mean you can't throw it ever. We know that, but it's a numbers game. They just have a tactical advantage that you have to work around and figure out. So I think you'll see that. I think you'll see Donald and Miller on opposite sides of the defensive front. Now my guess is Miller this week's not playing 60 snaps, but he'll play on, 2nd and 12. He'll play on 3rd downs. He'll play if there's a drive at the end of the first half. He'll play in selected situations.
Yeah, and that's all the opportunity that he needs to be that kind of impactful, especially against the Titans offensive line that just consistently stays banged up, whether they come into the game healthy and guys leave throughout the course of it. Nate Davis at this point remains in the concussion protocol, and Dylan Radins was underwhelming.
So let me ask you this. Dylan Radins is going to play right guard, I assume, correct?
At this point, yes.
Well, if that's the case, and maybe Dylan Radins becomes a phenomenal player. Let's hope he does. Sure. But he's going to have snaps against Aaron Donald, and he's going to get help. They're going to have to help him. It's that simple. They're going to. So that the Rams know that, and that sets them up. So now you get into just what I spoke about, the tactical element. It's not that, Dylan Radins is a rookie and Donald's great. Oh, that's a problem. Now you get into the tactical element of the game. How will the Rams align their fronts? This is something Coach Mack could speak about, I'm sure, better than I could, but there's a strong tactical element here that the Rams will take advantage of.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to our weekly conversation with Coach Mack on Friday, because if anybody understands that Rams defense or the personnel from that standpoint and throughout the course of his time in the league, it would be Coach Dave McGinnis.
He's a defensive coach and one of the best. So he'll be able to talk to you a lot more meaningful detail than I could, and he'll be able to really lay it out for you.
Well, let's talk about something that's been fascinating all year long, Greg, and that's the Rams offensive approach, the way that they've been taking advantage of teams. Only one loss on the year, and the offense, with Matt Stafford at the helm, it's been as good as it's ever been for Sean McVay and that collection of skill position players. What are they? What is, I guess, their philosophical approach first and foremost, and then we can talk about how they've been attacking teams the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, one of the things that they do, and they do more than any team in the league by a large amount, is they line up in empty sets. Okay, now empty sets, a lot of times quarterbacks like empty sets, okay, but some don't, because empty sets, there's a lot of defensive coaches who believe, hey, you line up empty, we know we can get someone clean to the quarterback, so we can make the quarterback play faster. But one of the things the Rams do when they line up in their empty sets, and there's a couple of things involved here, but let's start with this, is often they will have the two inside guys in empty. Empty could either be 3-by-2, meaning 3 receivers to one side, 2 to the other, or what they're doing and what more teams in the league are doing now is lining up 4-by-1, 4 receivers to one side and a single receiver to the boundary side, is they have the inside guy chip. So what they try to do, he either chips or he just looks to see if there's any pressure. So they, in a sense, start out with a 7-man protection. It's not a full 7-man protection, Buck, but it has that look to it initially, and that gives Stafford far more comfort. But let's get to one of the reasons it's so successful. First of all, Stafford has great vision in the pocket. Secondly, what you get when you line up an empty is you get from the defense tendency, predictability of coverage, because defenses do not line up versus empty in 5 or 6 different coverages. Versus empty, they'll have 1 or 2 coverages that are their default coverages versus empty. Okay, because you've got a spread. So you can't do a lot of different things, because the receivers are so spread out. So they know that going into a game. So there are tells based on their film study of the defense. And I don't know the tells that you have, that's why teams have 25 people on staff. I'm just me. So I don't know what the tells are, but it does give you tendency, predictability of coverage. And there's tells as to whether they're playing man, as to whether they're playing zone, how they're playing man, how they're playing zone. And Stafford knows all that before the ball's even snapped. So as I said, they probably run 10 or 12 snaps of empty every game. It's a high number, and Stafford has been off the charts phenomenal out of empty sets, like ridiculously phenomenal.
We've talked about this before, Greg, but the way that they use, and Sean McVay is obviously a very creative offensive football, offensively leaning football coach, but Cooper Kupp as a threat in this offense and the variety of different ways that they use him. How beneficial is he when it comes to scheming up advantageous matchups?
Well, I think they're really good in terms of their formations. They're very big using bunches, which is very difficult versus man coverage. It's very difficult when you play man to defend that. There's a ton of.
Can we focus on why? Can we expand a little bit on why it's difficult to play to defend bunch formations that way?
There's essentially two ways to defend bunch.
Okay.
Either you stay with your man, in other words, they line up in bunch, and if you're playing man, let's talk man. Zone is different, obviously, but if you're playing man, there's essentially two ways. You line up and say, "I got him." So normally in bunch, you have a point man in the bunch. You put a guy right on the point man defensively. He's got him. You have the two guys who are off the ball in the bunch set, and the two defenders say, "Hey, I got that guy and I got that guy."
Yeah.
So you just stay with them no matter how the routes shape out. You just play man coverage and you stay with them. Now, the issue there is in the bunch, guys, defensive backs can run into one another. You try to get the defensive backs at different levels so they don't run into each other, but it can be very difficult because there's natural picks and rubs that are involved in bunch releases.
Okay.
I hope people can visualize that, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, because we've seen Todd Downing do a little more of that at times, and I think that's an important an important place to kind of expand upon, just so the fans understand what exactly they're watching.
So the second part of that is, if you play man, is instead of just saying "I got him," because as we say in bunch, guys, when the ball's released, the receivers can cross, they can do any number of things, is you play releases. So in other words, let's say, for the audience sake, the way receivers are numbered, they're numbered from 1 to 3 from outside in. Mm-hmm. So the outside receiver is number 1, the next receiver is number 2, then the guy closest to the formation is number 3. So you might play it where you play releases, where the outside corner is going to be responsible for the receiver that becomes number 1. He may not be the guy who's number 1 based on the bunch alignment, but that guy might run a shallow cross and immediately go inside. So someone is going to replace him. Maybe number 3, the guy closest to the formation, ends up becoming number 1 after the release of the ball. So you play releases and then you match up to releases, as opposed to just saying, "I got Buck no matter what he does."
Yeah.
So those are the two essential ways you play bunch, and offenses will know exactly how the Titans want to play it. And I'm not sure exactly how they'll want to play it, but the Rams will know.
Yeah. Certainly Sean
Those guys
McVay
work a little harder at it than I do.
Well, like you said, Greg, I don't listen, do not discount yourself by any stretch of the
on
imagination.
one team. I can't do that. I know someone who works for the Rams, and he told me he did a full study on their empty sets and all that, and it took him, a week. I can't spend a week studying just the Rams empty sets, Yeah.
No, this is going to be a fascinating game, given what the Titans also don't have in the secondary. Now, it's unclear at this point whether Christian Fulton will be able to come off of IR and provide them a little additional depth. And in fact, neither Chris Jackson or Greg Maben did practice today, and that is.
Oh, Chris Maben did not go today?
Greg Maben and Chris Jackson did not go today. No.
I thought Maben, to me, has actually played pretty well. I mean, the last 2 weeks, he's pretty much played every snap, and I actually think he's done a pretty good job.
Well, and they brought him off the Cardinals practice squad. Now, he's had familiarity with this scheme and with this system prior, but can we expand, if you would, on what Greg Maben has done well with this Titans defense opposite Jack Rabbit?
Well, he's played right corner and Jack Rabbit's played left corner.
Right.
And, they don't match up. They just play. And I just think he's done a good job. I mean, I can't sit here, I'm not studying him on every play and watching all his technique and all that, but I think he's done a pretty good job for a guy that came in a couple of weeks ago and because he hadn't played football this year.
Yeah, no, it's been pretty impressive the way that they've been able to keep that thing together on the back end. Now, it helps that they're getting consistent pressure up front, and that Bud Dupree was active on Sunday and was making plays, certainly on that Elijah Molden pick six, Jeffrey Simmons and Danico Autry factoring in. Greg, with what with those empty sets that Stafford likes to run, as you mentioned, where they look how they can kind of decide where the pressure is coming before they release somebody or whether they keep somebody into chip. How, with what the Titans are doing well up front, how will they try and take advantage of some of these games and some of these stunts that they play to get pressure on Matt Stafford, regardless of what the formation looks like?
Well, the last 3 weeks, they played the Bills, the Chiefs, and the Colts. They haven't blitzed much at all.
Right.
It's been a 4-man pass rush, and they've played coverage. And they've played a lot of zone. I mean, they do play man, but they played a lot of cover 4. They played a lot of cover 3. Everybody matches up man, at times you have to. But they have not been a heavy man-based team over these last 3 weeks. So, I would think that they would not change that a whole lot. In fact, they're near the bottom of the league overall in terms of playing cover 1. We talked about the Rams being really low. Tennessee's really low as well. They are not a cover 1 defense. So, I think they're going to try to stay with their profile, because Stafford, by the way, he's been awesome against the blitz.
It's so good.
Yeah, he's been phenomenal against the blitz. You've probably seen the numbers.
Oh.
I see the tape. Stafford's just one of those guys. He's always been a special thrower of the football. It's so funny how things work. All these trick shot throws that Patrick Mahomes has been making for 3 years. Stafford was making them 10 years ago, but he played in Detroit, so no one talked about it.
Right.
But I think they'll stay with it. I mean, look, they got a sack on Wentz in, was it the second quarter, where they played cover 4. They played cover 4 beautifully. They had a stunt that was beautiful with Autry was the picker, and Landry beautifully sold his upfield rush and came underneath. In fact, they wanted to chip Landry, but because he then came inside, they couldn't chip him because he disappeared inside.
Yeah.
So I think you'll see those kinds of things. I think you'll see TT stunts with Simmons and Autry when Autry's inside. So I don't anticipate the formula changing dramatically. There's always tweaks in every game that you and I won't know about because we're not in the meeting rooms. And even watching the tape, I may not know about them because it might not look appreciably different than it normally looks.
Sure.
But I don't think the profile of how they play is going to change.
Greg, I think this may be the first podcast that we've spent the entire show on one particular game.
It's a great game. It's this is a really fun tactical game for me. I mean, I hope it's competitive. I hope it's not one of those games, that for whatever reason gets out of hand. But
you hope. I'm flying to LA. I hope it's
right.
I hope the hell it's competitive.
Right. But it's really a fascinating tactical game, in my opinion.
Yeah, and certainly one that that the entire football viewing public is going to have the opportunity to see under the bright lights of Sunday Night Football. Greg, I know there's a lot more that's going to be detailed on the matchup show coming up. I know that that Chiefs Packers I imagine that was in the rundown. I don't know if that remains because of Aaron Rodgers.
It'll still be in the rundown. It'll still be in the rundown. Yeah.
So that will be something that is must-see television. Make sure you DVR it, and you can catch the NFL matchup show with Greg Cosell, with Matt Bowen, and with Sal Pal, who was at the Indy Titans game over the weekend. It was good to be able to catch up with him. Greg, thanks so much for the time and for helping us understand how this is going to go down or how this may look on Sunday night.
Thanks, Buck. Appreciate it.